Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. Where does the government stand on the key issues of the Lokpal and how serious are its differences with Anna Hazare and his team? Those are the two issues I shall pursue today in a special two-part interview with the Human Resource Development Minister, Kapil Sibal. Kapil Sibal, let me start with a simple question. How serious are your differences with Anna Hazare and his team? Are they irreconcilable or can they be bridged?
I think no differences in the course of any dialogue are irreconcilable. I think that's the position that the government takes, and that's, I hope, the position that the others will take.
So if they're not irreconcilable, you're saying that each of the differences can be bridged?
Oh, absolutely, because negotiations are about bridging differences. Negotiations are not about increasing differences or taking hard positions.
Now, Anna Hazare's team has gone on record to say that the government has been unresponsive, that they haven't taken up the issues that they've raised seriously. In fact, Arvind Kejriwal specifically says that of the 71 points raised with you, only 15 have been addressed, 56 have either been ignored or forgotten.
We are addressing each point they wish us to address. We have never sort of said we will not address these issues, but while we were addressing these issues, they raised certain fundamental issues, and they said they want a discussion on those fundamental issues first. That's how the other points were not addressed.
So in other words, the fact that certain 56 points that they raised weren't addressed is because they themselves brought up other issues instead.
They said, you first address us on this, this and this. Okay, we said, all right, we'll do that.
Now, it emerges from comments made by both sides that when on the 30th of June a draft of the bill is sent to the cabinet, there will either be two drafts or there will be a single draft with two clauses on each of the contentious.
There will be no two drafts. You see, there are areas of agreement, so the text of the drafts will reflect that area of agreement. Where in particular clauses there is a disagreement, the two alternatives will be set up.
All right. Where there is disagreement, there will be two alternative clauses, a ministerial clause and Anna Hazare's team's clause. Now, I put it to you, given that this is going to the cabinet, what is the likelihood that the government will reject the clause submitted by its ministers in preference to the clause suggested by Anna Hazare?
That's really not an issue. That's something that the cabinet will debate, and I hope that they will take both points of view into account and debate it.
But can they take both points into account when they are polar opposite points?
Well, they may not be polar opposite points. There may be small areas of differences in drafting and stuff like that. I mean, I don't think we can predicate all that and say, look, the cabinet will reject what they have said or accept what they have said. This is something that will be open to debate.
But you're saying to me that there is a serious possibility that the cabinet may choose a clause that Anna's team has drafted rather than one which five ministers have drafted.
I can't say there's a serious possibility. We'll put both points of view and we'll have a discussion in the cabinet.
Now, your next meeting is on the 20th. Between the 20th and the 30th, when you have to submit the bill to cabinet, there are just 10 days. Do you believe it's possible that the serious differences, and I'll come to the differences in a moment's time, but do you believe it's possible that those serious differences can be resolved in an amicable and mutually acceptable way?
First of all, differences are meant to be resolved in a negotiation.
But they often aren't.
Well, if they are not, then they are not, because if you have a difference in principle of a different concept, I mean, it depends on what your concept of a Lokpal bill, and if that doesn't fit into the concept of the five of us sitting there, or there is a serious issue of principle, well, there will be differences. But we will try and resolve as much as possible, depending on what position they take. But as far as we are concerned, we are open.
If I understand you correctly, you will try and resolve as much as possible. You have an open mind, but as you've also said, there are serious differences.
Yes, there are issues.
You don't want to minimize the fact that there are serious differences.
Very serious issues.
And therefore, there's a good possibility that many of those serious differences will continue.
It's possible.
Up to and after the 30th.
It's possible. It's possible.
Now, Anna Hazare has already said that if the bill that's submitted to Parliament in the monsoon session is not acceptable to him, he will resume his fast at Jantar Mantar on the 16th of August.
It is not for me to comment on that, whether what Anna Hazare ji does depending on his perception or whether we have accepted or not, is something for him to decide.
No,
and
absolutely.
I mean, it's not for me to comment on that.
Except for the fact that if he goes on a fast, you could end up facing a second critical crisis.
I don't know. I don't want to speculate on any of those things. Let's get through the present hurdle of drafting a strong Lokpal bill for the people of this country.
So this is a hurdle for the future. You want to tackle them one by one.
We'll see when the hurdle comes, if at all it comes. We'll see.
Let's then come to the Lokpal bill itself. itself, and let's start by asking you about what concept of model of Lokpal you have in mind. Let me point out that Anna Hazare's teams made it clear that they want an independent, powerful Lokpal, one which can investigate, one which can prosecute, one which can recommend and in some cases enforce punishment and also redress grievance. What sort of Lokpal does the government have in mind?
First of all, there is no dispute between us on the fact that there should be an independent Lokpal outside the government. Not only that, there should be a separate investigating agency under their control outside the government. Not only that, they should be entitled to prosecute people. Not only that, for public servants, there need not be any sanction. These are huge areas of agreement which have not been placed before the public domain. So we want an independent Lokpal bill with a separate investigating agency, with a separate prosecution agency under the control of the Lokpal, and no public servant will require any sanction if the Lokpal decides to prosecute.
Now,
so these are huge areas of agreement. Now, the question is, one, the extent of the area that the Lokpal wishes to occupy. Should it be a Leviathan? Should it be a Leviathan? In other words, they say that you should cover every central government employee. Now, if the number of central government employees, I may be right or wrong, is about 4 million, about 40 lakhs. What kind of structure do you need? How many officers do you need? Right? How will that structure be kept in check? And this is a parallel structure outside the government. Should you have a parallel structure outside the government answerable to nobody, right? And if you want to cover state government employees, that's another 8 million, 7 to 8 million. So you are really covering 1 crore 20 lakh employees in the government through a Lokpal. How will that happen? Now, this is a huge area of concern for us. So I'm just telling you the structure. Our structure is, let's limit it, because by and large, people are concerned with corruption at high places, because all the alleged scams that have taken place are in respect of corrupt people, at high places. Let's deal with that. There are existing machineries for others. Let's strengthen those machineries.
Let me then pick up on the thought that you said that the government's point is let's limit it so that it's viable. They are trying to expand it and make it a Leviathan. Firstly, what class of officer do you think it will have jurisdiction over? Joint secretary and above, or all government employees? Well, the government's view?
It could, that's something, again, that's something that we can negotiate.
So you have an open mind?
Of course we have an open mind, but it should not be. See, it should not be something that's not manageable. Ultimately, where will you get the investigating agency from, Karan?
But
let me explain. Where will you get the investigating agency from? Either the existing, you're not going to get them from heaven. You're going to the existing investigating agencies, part of them will have to be transferred to them until they recruit fresh people. Where you get the prosecuting agencies, to the existing, right? So all those people will be from the existing structure. Let me just pose the question. If the existing structure is corrupt, and the existing structure is corrupt, which is their premise, then how will they suddenly become pure merely because they are transferred?
All of this suggests that the government is inclined to limit it to joint secretary and above, not joint secretary and below.
I didn't say that.
But it suggests that.
No, it doesn't suggest that. You are just saying that it suggests.
What about something
All
else?
I'm saying is, how does such a system, parallel system, work?
Well, we'll leave that for a moment. I'll come to that in a moment's time. But first of all, on this question of what class of officer, give me a clear answer. What is the government's thinking? Joint secretary and above, or all government employees?
I said to you that's negotiable.
Okay, so you have an open mind.
Yes, I've said that already.
Now, Anna Hazare and his team also want the Lokpal to have control and supervision over the CVC and the anti-corruption wing of the CBI. Is that part of your thinking?
Well, that's another issue that needs to be discussed. Should the CBI be entirely under their control, the CVC merged with them? That's another big issue.
So you have an open mind again here?
Of course, we are saying to them that yes, you can have a separate investigating agency, but you don't necessarily have to destroy the CBI. Therefore, you can have two agencies.
But what if they say that it makes better sense for the anti-corruption wing of the CBI and the CVC as a whole to be under the Lokpal? Are you open to that?
Well, we are discussing it. This is an issue. This is one of the issues we need to discuss. We didn't reach that stage of discussion in the last meeting because we were discussing the structure.
So as yet it's not a sticking point, it has to be discussed.
It has to be discussed.
Now, in fact, Anna Hazare's team go one step further. Their concept of the Lokpal extends beyond corruption to redressal of grievance. Is the government open to that?
Big issue. That's a big issue. For example, the proposition that they put forward is the following. If there's a government servant who is being investigated, and of course we say fine, you investigate him, you file a charge sheet against him through your investigating agency and prosecute him. We are at one with you, any public servant, any government servant. Then they say, if we find that we should have departmental proceedings against him, we should be having that power to decide on the punishment and the procedure.
That's not acceptable to you.
Now, what we are saying is, and we asked them as to why you want that. They said, because if we give it to the government will not act. So we said, well, why don't we think of an alternative? Namely, you can, once you prosecute him or once you charge sheet him, you can ask the government to proceed against him departmentally. And we can put a clause in the law saying that the government shall proceed against him within a time frame, right? So that takes care of your concern that the government will not act against him. And we say that once the Lokpal, which is an 11-member committee, chooses to issue a charge sheet against a government servant, which government dare not proceed against him? So these are all issues that we have, as you know, we are adjusting our positions and changing and responding to their concerns.
There's no doubt that you're adjusting, you're trying to accommodate, you're discussing. Exactly. But to sum up, it does seem that on this critical issue of the concept of the Lokpal, you have differences, fairly sizable differences over whether redressal of grievance should be part of it. You have an open mind but no agreement.
Qua government servants only.
Qua government servants. Yes. You have an open mind but no agreement over the CVC and the anti-corruption wing of the CBI.
No,
you have an open mind but no agreement over the question of whether Joint Secretary and above or all government.
Yes.
So on concept alone, which is the critical key core,
you see,
there are sizable areas where there is no decision and areas where there is difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is a huge difference. There is a critical, area where there is complete divergence. Let me tell you, give the example of the government servant. Let's take it a little forward. Under the present constitution, the government servant is protected under 311. He's also protected under Article 320, Sub-Article 3C. What does it say? It says when government moves forward with a departmental inquiry, the punishment has to be decided by the UPSC, whether he should be reduced in rank or he should be dismissed or removed. That power will have to be taken.
Anna Hazare's thinking would mean that that constitutional thing would have to be amended.
Yes, so the entire, now, this is a very difficult position.
Does this,
and the chairman explained to him that, look, we are a coalition government.
We can't amend the constitution.
We don't have absolute majority. So we can't give you any assurances
But on that point,
can
I just interrupt and say that you're suggesting that things that require constitutional amendment would be difficult to accept, but you have attempted constitutional amendments over the Women's Reservation Bill. It hasn't succeeded, but you've done it and you've tried it.
No.
Why not also have the same attitude here?
There are two issues. One, if we agree in principle, then only we move forward on the constitutional
amendment. That agreement in principle is still missing.
That agreement in principle is missing.
Right.
But even if we agree in principle, this requires constitutional amendments.
And therefore, I'm going to sum up this part by saying that on this key core issue of what sort of Lokpal are the two of you looking at, there are key differences and there are also key areas where there is no agreement as yet.
But I must state, I mean, as you will see from the record and from what I'm telling you, that we are moving forward.
Absolutely.
And we are
you said that once before. Right. You are moving forward. Some would say you're moving forward so incrementally that it's not satisfactory, but leave that aside. Let's take a break. I want to come back and raise with you the jurisdiction of the Lokpal. Should it cover the Prime Minister? What about the judiciary? What about MPs? Those are other areas where there are key differences between you and Anna Hazare. All of that in a moment's time. Stay with us. Welcome back to Devil's Advocate and a special interview with Human Resource Development Minister Kapil Sibal. Kapil Sibal, let's come to the jurisdiction of the Lokpal. First of all, in the government's mind, should the Lokpal cover the Prime Minister?
Well, first of all, the issue of the government deciding one way or the other is not arisen yet. Today, we're talking about 5 individuals on our side, 5 individuals who are representatives of Anna's group, discussing whether or not the PM should be covered. Government will decide only if it goes to, when it goes to the cabinet.
Well, absolutely, but what is the view of the 5 ministers?
Well, I've said to you, there are 4 or 5 possibilities. There may be even more. Number one.
No, but hang on. I won't let you repeat those possibilities because Mr. Chidambaram did so at the press conference on Thursday.
Right.
Those are the 4 possibilities.
Yes.
Does the government have a preferred answer?
No. This is what we are going to discuss.
No, but you're going to discuss it with them. What about within the government? Doesn't the government within itself have an answer?
Even within the government, we feel that that prima facie, the Prime Minister should not be covered. But how? But at the same time, we want to make sure that if the Prime Minister demits office, when the Prime Minister demits office, he should not be protected from prosecution.
So just to repeat, prima facie, your position is the Prime Minister, while in office, should not be covered. But when the Prime Minister demits office, there should be no reason why at that point he's not covered.
Exactly. So you protect the... See, it's not about individuals. It's not about Dr. Manmohan Singh. It's about the institution.
Except, can I put this to you? It emerges that at earlier points, the Prime Minister himself, Pranab Mukherjee, Mr. Chidambaram and Dr. Moily all have supported the case that the Prime Minister in office should be covered.
That's not correct.
Well, that was pointed out by Anna Hazare's team in a letter to the Prime Minister.
Factually incorrect.
No one
counted it.
No one counted it.
No, we counted it. We counted it in the meeting itself. What we said was that was a draft given by the Law Ministry without interministerial circulation. There was no view of the government. Even the Human Resource Ministry did not comment on that draft. It was a draft prepared as happens in several bills. So to say that that was the view of the government, or that Mr. Mukherjee, the finance minister or the home minister, supported it is completely...
Just to clarify, what you're saying is that the draft Lokpal bill circulated by the Law Ministry at the end of 2010 is only the view of the Law Ministry, which is not the view of the government. And therefore, you're also saying if that draft bill suggested that in a limited way the Prime Minister should come under the ambit of the Lokpal, that's not the government's view.
No, certainly not. That is not the government's view. Even at that time, there was no government view.
And at the moment, the government's view, such as it is prima facie, the Prime Minister should be excluded.
Prima facie, yes. This is subject to discussion. Because even in that draft, there was a conditional.
When you say subject to discussion...
We'll try and convince the Anna team.
Is there room for them to change your mind?
Well, I don't know. Why not?
Why not?
Why not?
So you could end up with the Prime Minister being covered.
Absolutely, because those possibilities are all open.
Okay.
We are entitled to put forward our considered viewpoint. But our considered viewpoint may not be acceptable to them, and they may well persuade us. But the point is, the way forward is not to say, if you don't agree with me, I will go on fast. That's not the way.
The most important thing you've indicated is that, in fact, at the end of the day, although prima facie you believe the Prime Minister shouldn't be covered, you can be persuaded and you could end up agreeing to the Prime Minister being covered. That is an open possibility.
Yeah, all possibilities. Our worry basically is the following. And Karan, I want to put it up front. Anna Hazare is like the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Okay? The tune is lilting, and people are upset with corruption, just as government is. We want to deal with corruption. But those who follow him, though they say corruption should be dealt with, don't know what the Lokpal bill is.
Oh, maybe. Yes, indeed.
And that's really the problem.
I understand that. The country doesn't know the details of the Lokpal bill. But leave that aside, because that's not germane to what we're talking about. No, let's come back to the issue of the Prime Minister. In his letter to the Prime Minister dated the 13th of June, Shanti Bhushan, the co-chairman, made a very telling point. He said, there is no civilized country that we are aware of where the head of government is immune from corruption investigations. And I put it to you, at the end of the day, do you want India to be an exception?
No. First of all, this is not an issue at all. Whether the head of government will not be not subject to investigation. The question is when. For example, if the President of the United States is subject to investigation not by Lokpal, not by any ombudsman.
But I'm talking about the Prime Minister. Let's stick to the Prime Minister of India.
President is the head of government. President is the head of government.
The executive head of the government is the Prime Minister.
Which Prime Minister has been prosecuted while in office anywhere in the world? Please give me an example. So let's not, you see, let's not
be
polemical.
You're disputing this point.
Which Prime Minister in office has ever been prosecuted? Please tell me. So let's not be polemical about these things.
Let me put this
We are talking about an institution.
Let me put this to you. Anna Hazare's team says that recently the government has ratified the UN Convention on Corruption. Clause 2A of that convention requires that all public officials should be subject to the jurisdiction of any anti-corruption mechanism.
Right.
Public official includes the Prime Minister.
Absolutely.
So you accept that?
But of course, but it says it's subject to your laws.
Absolutely.
So therefore, this is not.
Why would you devise the law that leaves
No,
the
it
Prime
says
Minister
subject
out?
to your internal laws. This is all subject to domestic laws. In other words, we can have a procedure where the Prime Minister is subject to prosecution under a domestic law which allows an outside agency to do it.
Okay.
But the International Convention doesn't say that you can't have a law of this nature.
Would you accept,
by which you can say...
Just so that we leave the audience with a certain measure of clarity, I want to repeat what you said at the beginning before we began to dispute comments made by Anna Hazare's team. What you said is that prima facie, the government is disinclined to bring the Prime Minister under Lokpal, but you have an open mind. You can be persuaded to the contrary, and it is possible, let me just finish and then you give me your answer, and it is possible that at the end, you might be persuaded to include the Prime Minister, perhaps in a limited way, perhaps in a full way, but that is an open possibility.
All possibilities are open, and even if we have a point of view which is part of the draft, the Cabinet can say no.
Absolutely.
Our Prime Minister has publicly stated, I don't mind to be, if I am included. He has publicly stated.
Absolutely.
But we are not concerned with individuals. We are concerned with the institution.
It's possible that what
in a situation, if there is a war, if there is some decisions to be taken, because the nature of the nature of Indian democracy is such that at the drop of a hat, the opposition in this country will want to destabilize the government, as we've been saying.
Let's keep out of that contentiousness. The main point I want to end this first interview on is that you have an open mind. Prima facie, you think the Prime Minister shouldn't be included, but at the end of the day, you could be persuaded to the contrary.
We have an open mind, and we have been actually addressing all of Anna Hazare's issues with that open mind.
Right,
unfortunately, we haven't got reciprocity there.
Well, let's not make this contentious. Let's end on that positive note. You have an open mind on the Prime Minister, and that is newsworthy. The government could end up agreeing to the Prime Minister being part of...
You're putting words in my mouth. I said we are an open mind.
Yeah, you could end up agreeing.
I said we have an open mind on discussing all issues. Prima facie, we think that the institution should be excluded.
But you can be persuaded to include it.
Anybody can be persuaded.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying.
If there's a good argument. If you were to give me a good argument, I'd be persuaded.
Kapil Sibal, let's end interview 1 on that point. Let's leave it there. I want an interview 2, which will go out on Sunday, to talk to you about whether the judiciary should be included, whether MP should be included, and I want to then bring up a different point. Or maybe I'm saying a somewhat devious point. Join me on Sunday to find out exactly what it is. But for today, goodbye, stay well.